Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Chris, and this is Regular Guy Training. So, before we get into the contents of the video, I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, come train with us, right? I have a website now that you guys can sign up for classes and stuff through there instead of going through the email chains that we had before. It's regularguy.training. That's it. I'll leave a link for that in the description below. We have our September classes set up already as far as dates and all that are concerned. Earlier in the month, we have our dedicated AK class coming. Number one, because I haven't done that class in a little while, and I really do like that class. A lot of people learn a lot in it, and the last dedicated AK class that we did, it had a very, very good reception. Those of you that are watching this and took that class, leave a little review of that in the comments below just to show people, what you experienced a little bit. And then after that, later on in the month, and you'll see the dates on the website, we have our performance series, both rifle and pistol. Now, both the rifle and pistol classes center very, very heavily on skill-based stuff, okay? Like, can we do this under a good amount of time? Can we do that under a good amount of time? Really, really high accuracy demands as well as really low time demands and stuff like that. And it also doesn't have a prerequisite. Now, both of these complement each other with the 1 and 2 classes, and the reason why there isn't a prerequisite on these individual performance series classes is simply because if you have 0 experience and you take the 1 class, okay, cool, you have a foundation as far as fighting skills and stuff like that, and that's great. If you have 0 experience and you come to a performance series class, you have a foundation of skills that we can then build fighting techniques off of. So people that take the 1 class, which is all martially driven, can really iron out their skills when they go to the performance series and vice versa. So again, those of you that have taken the performance series classes from us, go ahead and leave a comment for your review on that in the description, in the comments below also, because a lot of people like hearing this type of stuff. So, on to the actual contents of the video, though. So, I've gotten a lot of different questions on just like foregrips for rifles and stuff like that, because you guys have seen me use a variety at this point. To where, with the configuration video that I just did, I figured I would follow it up with this one real quick. Now, there sure, just like anything else that ends up on the internet a lot, there sure has been a whole lot of contention and aggressive debate on either the usefulness of foregrips or which one's better or whatever, right? So we're gonna go over a few. We're gonna talk about them and stuff like that, and I'm just gonna leverage a couple of my personal opinions. Now, first and foremost, as far as foregrips are concerned, what I've seen are essentially 2 different thought processes that a lot of people have had. The first one is that it is simply a reference thing, to where your hands go on the gun the same way every time and all that other stuff. And that seemed to be like the group think a few years ago. Before that, it was controlling recoil and pulling the gun in and all of that other stuff. And then the third is they're useless, right? Now, the truth is that I usually have found is someplace in the middle. Because I don't really figure them useless, but I also don't think that they are like an end-all be-all solution for a lot of things, just like most crap in the gun guy world. Now, of the variety here, we're gonna start with the simplest, and that is, minus a foregrip entirely. Now, a lot of you guys have seen this rifle and stuff like that, and I've even gotten a couple of questions because a lot of you guys have seen certain foregrips on rifles and stuff like that I've used in the past, that this one just doesn't have one on it. Now, here's the thing, and here's what leads me to just not use certain foregrips for certain things. In all honesty, it has to deal with how light the rifle recoils in the first place, or how smooth it recoils in the first place. And usually, if it's something like a mid-length gas system on a rifle and up, to me, especially with a good brake or a good muzzle device up front, it doesn't really require me to mess with a foregrip of any kind. The recoil impulse is straight to the rear. It's nice and soft. I can get in it and shoot really fast with it, and that's fine, right? Now, the cool thing about not having a foregrip on this on the gun at all is that it does lead it to be just a little bit more versatile in that if I have to throw this on top of a piece of cover or brace off of a bag or something related similarly to that, it's real easy to do because I'm just slapping it up top and it's no real big deal, right? And additionally, it allows me to just use real good extension. It allows my hands to be where they need to be. I can sit there and, quote, drive the gun really well, which essentially just means I can control the recoil real well, keep the gun nice and flat, and run it real hard. Okay. So, to me, it's a pretty good mix of things. However, once we start getting into, like, carbine-length gas systems and short-barreled rifles and all kinds of crap like that, what ends up happening is that my thought process begins to change a little bit. Now, on a specific thing that I had thought for a little while now, and there's a rock wedged in here, so you're just going to have to bear with me, but on a specific thing that I had thought for a while now, like, to me, foregrips were just 100% necessary all the time and all that jazz, right? And just over time, my thought process on that, just as it has for a lot of things, has changed. Now, the first thing that I'm going to talk about here is the angled foregrip. This is what has ended up on this channel the very most. You guys have seen it on AK-style rifles as well as AR-style rifles, and as far as just size of rifle, it's gone kind of all over the place. But for me, it's one of those deals to where I start adding foregrips to things now that have just a little bit rougher of a recoil impulse to them. Again, like carbine-length gas systems and stuff, and understanding the fact that they don't recoil that hard, they just pop a little bit more, and they're just a little bit harder to shoot as fast as I would like, or as flat as I would like. And really all it is just being in control, making sure that you're accountable for where the bullets are going and that type of deal. So the first one here is the angled foregrip. Now, I have heard only one of two opinions on this individual foregrip, and that's either A, it's useless, it doesn't really perform a specific function, or B, it works really, 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 really well. And I believe this is in the method in which they are used. Now, if you were just to grab onto angled foregrip and use it like so, it's sort of comfortable. I would even argue that. I don't really think it is. But it's just kind of like an extra thing that's on the gun. And the problem that I see with that, just grabbing onto it, is that it doesn't really do anything for you. Like if you're trying to pull the gun in, because that's a technique for foregrips, if you're trying to pull the gun in, it doesn't really help as far as having much to pull in and stuff. But if you simply grab onto it on this front end with your index finger and then use that thumb to just kind of stop yourself on either like your light or another portion of the rail sections or whatever, it makes it real easy to passively have a lot of control over the front end of the gun. And what it really does, and just how your arms generally tend to sit, if you simply just grab onto it like so and have a fairly solid grip. I'm not talking about white knuckling it, but if you have a solid grip onto it instead of just a real loose or passive one, it brings in a lot of passive rearward pressure into the gun simply by gripping onto it. So in my opinion, it actually really does help as far as recoil control and stuff like that. And in addition to that, if I'm trying to throw this thing on top of a bag or something like that, I can still do that pretty easily, in fact. Okay, and if it's a wall or a piece of cover or something like that, you can essentially use this lip to dig in there. Now, with that being said, though, it's one of those deals to where I understand why a lot of guys, even if they're gripping it this way, don't like these individual foregrips, because it feels like your whole hand is being taken up, and some people don't like that. Some people like to either A, they have pretty short digits and they can't quite wrap in certain respects to it, or they just don't like having their hand that open when grabbing onto a rifle. I completely understand that. So then there's another alternative to it. And the other alternative is this guy right here. And it's just a regular short broom handle, okay? Or just a regular short little stub grip and stuff like that. And a lot of guys like these. Now, the old way to grab onto these was like so, and a lot of people found out that there's a whole lot of rocky feeling in there. You can actually see it if you're just watching somebody shoot, especially if they're trying to shoot pretty quickly. You see a whole lot of this jazz going on. So what people started to do is that they started to grab onto these things in a similar way that they would grab onto a pistol grip, like for a pistol. So what ends up happening is that you have a grip similar to like so. I personally like gripping onto a regular down grip like so, where a portion of my thumb is chilling on my light, and then I can activate it, all that stuff. And the light is turned on right now, so it's one of those deals to where I can just kind of sit there and chill my thumb on there, and when I have to, I can just roll into it, that type of deal. And if I have to just keep it on, I can just click it on. That's why I like click on, click off type lights. Food for thought on that. But a lot of guys will sit there and grip the rifle like so, or like so, whichever. And what I've noticed actually is that if you do apply pressure to the rear, the gun actually does stay a little bit more stable. So like you have guys like, or companies like BCM that have like a slightly wider based down grip that flares out in one direction or another, and a lot of guys, well, just one direction, to where a lot of guys will equip this down grip to where it's facing slightly canted out this way, so it's easy for them to bring those couple of fingers in and really wrench the gun into place with very little effort. So, in my opinion, that is, based on what I've felt, okay, and it's really subjective once I start talking about what I feel, right? It's easier to keep the gun shooting very flat and very fast as far as just a shooting part. With just a regular down grip on there, I feel as if there's a little bit more surface area for me to bind into and wrench into place. And if I'm doing maneuvers or working around people or coming around corners, it's just a little bit easier for me to wrench the gun into place and do what I have to do with it. In addition to the fact that I like having a wider grip with my hand and stuff like that. So me having to sit this guy on top of this light, or light housing and stuff like that, is really no big deal for me. There are some guys that like to use the thorn tail mount and shove the light a little bit more forward so that they are doing more of this number rather than this number, and that's okay. That's all personal preference. But I personally like these as far as just the shooting part is concerned, and I can still wrench the gun from right to left pretty easily. Where the issue for me comes in is if I have to set this on to a piece of cover ever, I'm regulated to going into it like so. And it is real difficult to set on a bag or something like that, because even if I try to set it on a bag, it invariably tries to do this, which means that I have to snake my hand in there anyway and brace on a bag like that, which almost defeats the purpose. So shooting off the ground using your magazine as a monopod is pretty much the only way to go with a foregrip like this. So now, where does this like fit in as far as just like purposes or purpose-driven type stuff and all that jazz, right? Now, I like both. I can use the absolute crap out of both, but generally speaking, if I was to put a preference of one or the other, number one, if I have a mid-length gun or something like that, then I just go slick. I rely on a muzzle device. I go slick with it, and I can just shoot like a regular competition shooter and stuff like that, and I can throw it into whatever I need to. It's no big deal. If it's a smaller gun, I throw a foregrip of some kind on there, and just because you see one on here doesn't mean that it's exclusive to here, because I kind of bounce back and forth between the two a lot. I have this current configuration here where this guy's on this gun, and the regular broom and the short broom handle is on this gun. Before I had it set up to where the angled foregrip was on this guy and the broom handle was on that guy. because the angle foregrip being on this guy being like the quote military clone, that's all army as fuck and whatnot. I would find myself more and more often throwing the gun on top of things and all that other stuff. But then I changed it up because number one, I'm bored, and I like to change things up and experiment when I'm bored. And number two, I find myself more and more now just setting the magazine in the ground and shooting well with that. Like, it's how I zero a rifle now, and I'm still able to get, you know, mechanical accuracy out of the gun in that way, so it's less and less of an issue for me. So really, it's down to how short is the gas system, how much is it going to pop when you try and shoot it faster, and if it's a carbine length or lesser, which I only really stop at carbine length. I generally don't go into the pistol length field unless it's with like a 300 black. But I'll throw a foregrip on there if it has a shorter gas system, and if it's a longer one, I just don't. So, oh, one more thing. Hand stops and whatnot, right? Like, there was this thing going around for a while where hand stops are a thing, and there's probably going to be a question asked on what I think about hand stops. I don't have a positive or negative view on them. They're there, you know, and I understand the theory, what is theorized to where, again, it's just throwing your hands into a uniform space over and over, and there's that comfort of that thing between a couple of fingers. It's either these two or these two that I see generally, and it's that comfort of being like, okay, that's where the gun is supposed to be. But for me, it's, and this is just because I have really long noodly arms, for me, that comfort is right here. So wherever the hand is kind of thrown down, my thumb touching that front sight post is essentially the comfortable part for me, and that's all. And that's where my reference is it's over the top, not underneath. That's how I've reasoned it in my brain, and there's going to be other people with different opinions, so it's not really that big of a deal, you know. The notion, though, like, I understand the thought process between a lot of different people, but the notion, though, that foregrips, and I've seen it kind of heavy on this guy, that this guy right here is useless for the individual. To me, that's when we start going into like mouth breather land. That's where I don't see that tool is useless opinion as a super valid opinion. Mostly because what I've seen before is that I've seen dudes with these on their guns, and they're like, man, I don't really see what this is doing for me at all. And then you have them just wrap up that one index finger, and you're like, holy crap, this is 1,000 times better than where it was before. Something simple like that. So what I believe it to be is a user issue rather than what's the reality type issue. And we see that all the time on the internet, so it's not like that's a surprise, really. So when you start hearing things like foregrips are useless, again, to me, we're walking into mouth breather land. And I figured that, you know, just shedding a little bit of light on that, or at least throwing out some of my opinions, would at least make a couple of people understand, okay, why I attach certain things and all this other crap. So really, that's it. I mean, throw an opinion or of what you configure your rifles with in the comments and stuff like that below. I saw some interesting configurations of guns. Most of them super simple and really good that I would see. Like, there were some configurations that I saw in the comments of the last video where it's like, man, I'd run the crap out of that. That sounds good. So, you know, give me some opinions on what you think about foregrips in general. And, you know, we'll pretty much go from there. If you want to join our discussion group on Facebook, I'll leave a link for that in the description below. Come train with us, because the website is up, and we have classes for September slated. We have both performance. We have the performance series, rifle and pistol setup. They're 2-day classes, and rather than introduce you to fighting techniques, what we do is one of two things depending on skill level, because this class does not have a prerequisite. It's either we're giving you a base set of skills that we can then work up to fighting style with, or we're taking your current fighting style and we're really putting it to the test. Real tight time constraints, real high accuracy requirements and stuff like that. And we work individually. We keep the class sizes pretty small in these because we work individually with people to help them really iron out a lot of efficiency issues that a lot of guys may or may not have. Or we can be the guy that watches you real close, see what it is that you're doing, and push for perfection, because that's what we're all trying to do, right? It's both for rifle and pistol. That's later in the month. About halfway through the month, we have our dedicated AK class again. So, go ahead and check that out. Because the last dedicated AK class that we did had a crazy good reception, and the people there really like the content, so we're going to go ahead and handle that. But if you want to support us through Patreon so that we can get soldiers out here and train them up for free, you can also go ahead and do that. I'll leave a link for that in the description below. So, you know, we'll pretty much go from there. So, with that being said, remember guys, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.